I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel sends a major warning to Syria. The Israeli Prime Minister finally responds to the recent reconciliation deal between the Palestinians, and we'll reveal the shocking discovery that has just been made underneath the Western Wall. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu has just issued a major warning to Syria less than a day after the neighboring country launched missiles at Israeli jets. Now, the Israeli leader wants to draw a very clear line in the sand.
המדיניות שלנו ברורה. מי שמנסה לפגוע בנו, אנחנו פוגעים בו. היום ניסו לפגוע במטוסנו, לא מקובל עלינו. חיל האוויר פעל בדיוק, במהירות, והשמיד את מה שצריך להשמיד. אנחנו נמשיך לפעול במרחב ככל שדרוש כדי להגן על ביטחון ישראל.
Israeli jets launched a counterattack on Syria after an anti-aircraft battery launched missiles at Israeli Air Force planes returning from an intelligence mission in Lebanon. Luckily, none of the Israeli fighters were hit, but reports are now saying that less than 24 hours after Netanyahu's warning, Israel has actually authorized a second counterattack, this time against Islamic State targets that launched missiles from Egypt's Sinai Peninsula only a few days ago. Those rockets landed in an open field in the south of Israel and luckily didn't cause any casualties or damage. But regardless, Israel has set a very clear red line and is prepared to defend it. Syrian troops backed by the U.S. have just done the impossible and completely driven the Islamic State from their capital of Raqqa in Syria. The victory comes right as Russia's defense minister is here visiting Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu took the opportunity to reaffirm that Israel would not allow Iran to seep into Syria, especially in the wake of all the chaos. The images you're seeing were taken on the front lines just moments ago in the Syrian city of Raqqa. What was once the capital of ISIS operations has now finally been liberated after a months-long push by Syrian Democratic Forces, aided by the United States. The fall of Raqqa is a historic turning point in the war against the Islamic State, with fighters celebrating and even dancing in the streets. This breaking news coincides with Russian Defense Chief Sergei Shoigu's first ever visit in Israel and has just taken center stage at his meeting with Israel's Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. Russia is a key player in Syria, which is why Prime Minister Netanyahu also met with Shoigu personally and reaffirmed Israel's pledge to prevent Iran from gaining any foothold in the area. Iran has been seeping into Syria amidst the chaos and instability, putting a very lethal threat right on Israel's doorstep. But let's remember that just yesterday, the army didn't hesitate to launch a counterattack against Syria, one of Russia's closest allies. It doesn't look like that elephant in the room, however, was brought up during their meeting. Joining us to discuss the recent rise in tensions in Syria is Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, what are your initial reactions to the tit-for-tat that's been going on between Syrian and Israeli forces?
Well, I think this could be the sign of a dangerous escalation. I think the Syrian factor here is probably the more minor. The problem is, does this escalate into a confrontation with other powers there, mainly Iran and Russia? And I think that places Israel in a very delicate situation, and I can only hope that at least with the Russians, there's some sort of coordination. Obviously, with the Iranians, there isn't.
So how much do you think this is going to be mentioned in the meetings that we're seeing between the defense ministers, the Russian defense minister and Avigdor Lieberman?
Well, I'm sure the question of coordination, I would at least would hope that the question of coordination with the Russians would take a very major portion of the discussions, because that's crucial. I mean, we really don't want to get into a physical confrontation with the Russians.
Right, but obviously Israel is now setting red lines of sorts, And the question is Russia going to be happy with what Israel is planning on doing in the future when it comes to dealing with the threat from Syria?
Well, I'm not sure that Israeli interests and Russian interests are identical. I'm just hoping that we can coordinate and explain to the Russians that our only reason for freedom of operation in the skies of over Lebanon and Syria is to protect our own sovereign territory and our own citizens. And I can only hope that the Russians will understand that.
Well, we're hoping that, right? So now let's talk about those red lines a little bit and who's setting them.
Well, I don't know whose red lines you mean. I think Israel has its own red lines, and one of them should be and must be freedom of action over the skies of Lebanon and Syria. Even this is some sort of infringement of their sovereignty. You know, you may raise the question: does Syria have the right to protect the sovereignty of its skies? Or probably it does, but Israel has the duty, on the other hand, to use them to collect the intelligence and generate the operational freedom that it needs. But in this particular instance, I understand the planes weren't even over Syria; they were over Lebanon, and this might have been a misunderstanding on the Syrian parts, on the part of Syria, which shows how easily things can escalate. Into violence.
Well, here's the question. I mean, do you see Israel continuing to operate as normal per se despite this latest conflict, or are we going to see a major change in what's happening on the ground?
Well, in the short run, I think we'll see Israel carrying on operating in this way. I don't think it has much option. Whether it can generate alternatives through satellites or cooperation with the Americans or other things like that, at least for intelligence collection, I don't see much other option if it's going to be things beyond intelligence collection, like operational strikes against arms convoys and things like that, as we've seen in the past. I think that what this does show is that the Syrians are ever more confident in their ability to respond, because up until now there have been numerous attacks in Syrian territory and there's been no response, even though Israel hasn't always accepted responsibility for them. But I mean, normally the consensus is that it was Israel who struck. So this might show that the Assad regime is becoming more and more confident and feels that he can build on the support of maybe the Russians and certainly the Iranians, which of course goes away to say how lucky we are we didn't give back the Golan.
All right. Well, Dr. Martin Sherman, thank you so much for joining us, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens next, right?
Thank you.
All right. The Israeli Crossing Authority is always busting goods that are being smuggled in and out of Hamas's hands. But this latest find might take the cake, or should I say the slipper. Crossing guards recently discovered a massive shipment of army boots en route to the Hamas army, carefully disguised in a shipment of fluffy emoji-faced footwear. As you can see here, quite a bit of thought, effort, and even some creativity went into this operation. The IDF believes that the boots, which were individually stitched into plush bedroom slippers adorned with cartoon emojis, are the latest cargo intended for Hamas's military wing. Checkpoint guards recovered a wide array of army boots in the shipment, both black and camouflage, suggesting multiple purposes. A joint Israeli task force will now oversee if this stunt was repeated in the past or reflects new tactics for the future. But suffice it to say, this bust makes it clear that Hamas is willing to get creative when it comes to war and that Israeli eyes are always on the lookout. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas have just signed a historic reconciliation deal, and many have been waiting for the official Israeli response. Well, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has now told his security cabinet that Israel will not be breaking ties with the PA as some had expected, but won't recognize the reconciliation deal either. With us now is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith. And Brett, what should we be gathering from this response?
Well, I think it tells us a lot. First of all, I think it would mean that Netanyahu is prepared to take the reconciliation seriously, but at the same time, he's aware that it really could fall apart immediately any time, and that's something Israel's seen time and time again in the past. On the other hand, if the Palestinians do manage to hold the deal together, Netanyahu is going to feel quite a lot of pressure internationally to quickly restart the peace process, which of course has been at a standstill since 2014.
Right, and of course there's also the internal question of how Israel should react to the PA joining forces with Hamas, which is still, of course, calling for the total annihilation and destruction of the Jewish state.
Absolutely, and so far that's looking like the biggest sticking point in the Palestinian unity deal at all, since Hamas has completely refused to give up its army. So Netanyahu's really kind of trapped right now with what he can say, because he knows it's in Israel's best interest to end the suffering in Gaza But at the same time, I'd say he has to prepare himself for who he might be negotiating with in the future if and when Palestinian reconciliation is really going to be a reality here, as you'll see right now in the report. Days after the Palestinians' historic reconciliation deal has seemingly bridged the decade-long rivalry between Hamas and Fatah, Israel finds itself at a crossroads. Prime Minister Netanyahu has reportedly just told his closest Security Council that the country will not break ties with the Palestinian Authority over the reconciliation, but at the same time will refuse to recognize it at all. That's because the Prime Minister has repeatedly sworn Israel would only recognize a unified PA that completely dismantled Hamas's 25,000 soldier-strong army, something that is yet to happen. Word is that Israel will not seek any actions to interrupt the deal, but in fact will cooperate in helping PA staff reach Gaza to begin the transfer from Hamas. Though there's still much on the table left to discuss before reconciliation becomes a reality, most believe a deal would throw the ball back in Netanyahu's court, pressuring him to restart the stalled peace process.
For the first time in 15 years, Israel has reportedly just approved the construction of 31 new Jewish homes in the city of Hebron. The move is seen as a major response to UNESCO's controversial decision earlier this year to declare Hebron an endangered Palestinian World Heritage Site. ILTV's Aaron Porras is here in the studio with more on this story. Now, Aaron, the timing on this decision can't just be coincidence, right?
It doesn't appear to be a coincidence, no. I mean, this decision just comes out a week after both the United States and Israel drop out of UNESCO. You know, with the United States even specifying that some of their reasons were the United Nations is, you know, clear anti-Israel bias
right.
and history of that. As for Hebron, you know, the recent resolution from UNESCO against Hebron claimed it completely denied any Jewish and Israeli historical connection to that city, which includes the Cave of the Patriarchs, which is a very holy site in Judaism and all of the Abrahamic faiths for that matter. As for building in Hebron, the approval of the new buildings, it hasn't yet been approved, neither confirmed nor denied by the government. But if it is approved, it certainly sends a very clear message to
the United Nations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and does it feel like things are only ramping up in that respect with the U.S. and Israel kind of on one side and the United Nations on the other?
It's fair to say, to look at it that way. I mean, even now there are two Republican congressmen who are working to have to reaffirm Jewish lineage in Jerusalem through resolutions in the United States Congress. And now in the wake of that decision, we're hearing that the UN has gone back, you know, in this kind of back and forth with America and Israel, saying that any company, Israeli or otherwise, operating in disputed territories is not going to be banned from the United Nations. So it's a very interesting time, but I'll explain much more in my report right now.
All right.
For the first time in 15 years, Israel has reportedly just approved 31 new Jewish homes for construction in the city of Hebron. The move, which has yet to be confirmed by the Israeli government, is being seen as a response to UNESCO's controversial decision to declare Hebron an endangered Palestinian World Heritage Site. But that's just one of the many resolutions passed by the United Nations organization seen by some as unfairly anti-Israel. Both the United States and Israel announced their surprise departure from UNESCO less than a week ago, and now it looks like a group of American GOP lawmakers are taking things even further. Senator Ted Cruz and Representative Matt Gaetz have just introduced a resolution to Congress reaffirming the Jewish people's connection to the city of Jerusalem and condemning UNESCO for repeatedly denying to do so. Less than 24 hours later, reports emerged that the United Nations is about to ban nearly 100 companies from doing business in the disputed West Bank areas, including Bezeq, one of Israel's biggest telecom companies. So it looks like this tug of war with the United Nations is only just heating up.
The Israeli government came up with a controversial plan recently intending to establish a database of every single Jewish American college student in the United States. Now, they've quickly pulled the plug on the registry after Hillel International threatened to drop all ties with the government if they went ahead. Hillel International is the world's largest Jewish campus organization, and as soon as they heard of the government's Jewish American registry, Hillel immediately slammed the idea, saying it's not in the best interest of engaging American Jewish college students. Diaspora Affairs Minister Naftali Bennett is the original brains behind the project, which intended to first identify over 350,000 names of Jewish students and then compile them into a single registry. The government had hoped this list would give them a greater ability to map all events, content, and life, both on campus and online. Needless to say, news of the registry has sparked outrage the moment it made headlines. Hillel's ultimatum to cut ties with the government was clearly a very, very severe threat, because now the Knesset has dropped the plan altogether. A few years ago, Israel became the very first country to outlaw fashion firms from employing dangerously underweight models in their ads. Now, the country is set to push the law even further and fine companies that continue to use models below a set body mass index or even Photoshop them from below the neck. Israel was the first to put the so-called anti-Photoshop law into effect, triggering similar laws across the rest of the world. France is considered one of the fashion capitals of the industry, and just this month, a new French law will even impose jail sentences on those who break the law. Now Israel is about to tighten punishments as well by introducing new fines that seek to halt the dangerous trend of agencies that encourage underweight models on the runway.
ויהיה אדם שישב במשרד הבריאות והוא יוכל להטיל קנסות מנהליים גבוהים ביותר על מנת לאכוף את החוק. ואנחנו לא ניתן יד לכך שתעשיית האופנה תמשיך לקבוע את מודל הרזון בשום פנים ואופן, ואנחנו רוצים שיהיה לנו דור בריא ואנשים בריאים, ושלא תהיה כאן לא אנורקסיה ולא הפרעות אכילה.
The trend of abnormally skinny fashion icons has been proven to promote negative body images in both men and women all over the world. It's considered one of the leading causes of all kinds of eating and psychological disorders in recent years. Israel's announcement to tighten the law comes right as both the famous designers Christian Dior and Gucci have just pledged to stop hiring underweight models, meaning hopefully this dangerous trend is coming to an end soon. Every day the world feels just a little bit smaller, and that's mainly because of the internet. Well, joining me now in the studio is Dan Zaitchik, the CEO of Gilat Telecom, a company that's providing internet connectivity to millions of people across the Middle East and Africa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your company.
Well, Gilat Telecom started years ago, and we have a vision of connecting the unconnected. In order to do so, we started with satellite connectivity and provided internet over satellites. And then we have widened our portfolio. We did investments in some fiber optics that are connecting Africa to Europe and to the internet, and by that introducing a high-speed internet into Africa, and being a significant part of connecting the unconnected and closing the digital gap between Africa and the Western world.
Which is so important. I mean, and it's not so many companies that are focusing in this region. Talk to us a little bit about why having more internet connectivity is so important to this region, to the Middle East and to Africa.
I think that everybody is aware now that in the recent years, internet became a utility and infrastructure that we cannot live without.
Yeah.
Now, in these regions, especially in Africa, in the more remote places, people are not connected, and by that, it doesn't have the access to education, health, and other issues that for us is a day-to-day, obviously, thing that we're using. So in order to connect them and give them the enablement, in order to enjoy and to expand their horizons, we are connecting the internet over to these villages and to these remote places.
Now, what is special about your technology in comparison to other technology that exists right now?
What the uniqueness of Gilat is that we are adopting technologies and introducing it into Africa. Basically, we started in a small and traditional satellite operators using VSATs. Then, as I said, we introduced the fiber, and now recently we adopted an O3B technology, which is a very advanced technology that gives a very high-speed internet in an affordable prices.
So, I mean, first of all, how many people have you connected?
Basically, we're connecting over millions of people that are connected through our networks and connected from Africa into Europe.
That's a big deal. Now, what is next for the company? Are you planning on focusing on other, parts of the world?
I think that the biggest challenge that we are facing now is to find an affordable solution that will be introduced into remote places. Now we are focusing in the major cities, and now after this we went to the smaller cities, and now we want to go to the villages, which will be the next step in introducing the services.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, guys, the mother of all archaeological discoveries has just been made right here in the Holy Land. After lying underground for 1,700 years, a massive section of the Western Wall has just been unearthed, along with a stadium that experts believe may be Jerusalem's lost theater. This shocking discovery is the first of its kind, bringing 8 stone courses of the Holy Western Wall to light for the first time since the Roman period. The new section of the wall, which is of course regarded as the single holiest site in Judaism, has been unearthed in perfect condition, remarkably preserved. But wait, that's not all. Nearby, archaeologists were also shocked to discover a massive stone theater, built in a style that dates back to the era of Jesus. Experts now believe this may be the legendary Lost Theater of Jerusalem, which archaeologists have been searching for hundreds of years.
For 150 years, archaeologists didn't know where these theaters were and basically posed all kinds of theories of where they may have been. This is the first time that a theater-like structure has been exposed in Jerusalem, so it's extremely exciting. And as far as its importance, well, it gives us an indication not only of the importance of Jerusalem, which we know was a very important city up until the destruction in 70 CE, but also subsequently in when the Romans built their colony of Aelia Capitolina, their placement of a theater here basically indicates that this colony was an important colony.
The Lost Theater is one of many sites mentioned in historical texts dating back to the Second Temple period. Built to seat 200 viewers, this theater is significantly different from typical Roman amphitheaters in Israel, like the ones in Caesarea and Bet Guvrin. That suggests that this one might have been used for private music or theater performances. Between that and the entire new section of the Western Wall, this has been a massive day for the history books. We like to think that Tel Aviv is a full-on smart city, but there's still a lot of progress to be made. Well, there's some good news. Israel is set to launch a new light rail line that will link Tel Aviv and the surrounding cities, and ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh has the latest news on the advancing project.
A new addition to Israeli public transportation is being added, and we are more than excited about it. For those of you who have yet to visit the Holy Land, means that you have yet to experience the roads here in Israel. Some people say we're impatient, others say we're fabulous drivers, but either way, the Tel Aviv metropolitan area is working on a new way to get around.
The line is 24 kilometers, 12 underground and 12 at grade. In Tel Aviv, there are 10 stations. Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, and Bnei Brak, 10 stations underground.
So for those of you who are reluctant to sit in traffic, looking to get to work in a more comfortable and efficient manner, how much longer can we expect this project to take before it's officially open for public use?
We said from the first day it will take 6 years. We started 2 years ago, so we passed 1/3 of the schedule. So we are confident that we will finish it on time on October 2021. Now we are driving from Petah Tikva to Tel Aviv, and it takes 1 hour. With our train, it will take only 20 minutes.
So I was wondering, how many people does it take to work on a project this size?
We have an international crew that is working on the project, people from all over the world, and of course Israeli companies. I think there are more than 5,000 people working on this project. The cost of the project is $4 billion.
At the end of the day, no matter how many years it took to plan, revise, and come up with the final layout, this project is going to change the lives of thousands of people all over.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day, there have been some big updates lately surrounding the Tel Aviv light rail lines, which are set to be completed by 2024. Well, with the construction on the first route through Tel Aviv already underway, we thought today's word should be kav, or line. Why kav, you ask? Well, in honor of the kav adom, or the red line, the first route that will be operational on the light rail line. But a kav is more than just a line on a train or bus route too. You can also draw a picture with curly kavim, or lines. You can create a kav or streak on the street by driving really fast. And if you're lucky, you can teach your kids to l'shaer bekav, or stay in line. But whatever the kav you're dealing with is, just remember that most kavim, or lines, are meant to be crossed anyway, even if just a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 66 or 19 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is expected to be clear with a high of 85 or 29 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.51 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.